course, yeah.
Richard Aram, and thank you for inviting us to speak about the mandatory use of closed-circuit television in slaughterhouses in England. I say England because animal welfare is a devolved issue in the UK territories. So Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland have their own legislation. My name's Richard Aram. I've been in government policy advice for 25 or so years. A good amount of that time spent in animal welfare at slaughter. So why mandatory CCTV? Well, up until about 2015, we had been pursuing a policy of voluntary CCTV in slaughterhouses, but that had stalled over the years to about 50% of red meat and 70% of poultry slaughterhouses. And those were mainly the larger premises supplying major retailers. And where there was CCTV, it wasn't in all areas. At the same sort of time, we were seeing quite a lot of covert filming of welfare abuses in slaughterhouses. And this very quickly, when publicised, becomes a political issue. The UK government's asked the advisory body, the Farm Animal Welfare Committee, to provide it with advice to establish an evidence base for policy change, which was published in 2015 and is available online. The committee identified CCTV as having significant benefits for monitoring welfare in slaughterhouses, but also many benefits for business operators. And I'll cover those shortly. And the report that the committee produced formed the basis of a consultation that government conducted in 2017. Falk saw the main animal welfare benefits as being continuous observation and recording of live animal areas. The official veterinarian cannot be in every place at all times, and you can particularly target high-risk areas. Inspectors, official vets, and the slaughterhouse operator can view footage at any time, in real time, but also in response to issues that might arise. And the committee considered CCTV to be an important backup for the official veterinarian, particularly in difficult to reach areas, but did not wish it to be a replacement, if you like, for the physical presence of the official veterinarian. Still deemed that to be very important. We mentioned that there were benefits to industry. Those included increasing public trust in what they were doing, making sure that they could demonstrate compliance with the law, and as previously mentioned, with retailer and farm assurance scheme rules, that they could themselves identify welfare issues within their setup, and evaluate and assess their operations and change them to suit. Also very important in staff training in the handling and welfare of animals, the equipment that's used, and all the processes. As I say, the government in England went out to public consultation for a 2-month period. The response from the public was overwhelmingly positive and in favour of mandatory CCTV, to the point that government decided to proceed. Now, the majority of responses were from the public, so we thought it really important not only to consider industry responses made to the consultation carefully, but also to engage with them positively to see what their issues were and how we could resolve them while pushing the policy of mandation forward. Now, the scope of the regulations that came into being was that operators must install and operate a CCTV system that provides a clear and complete picture of areas where live animals are present. So this is from the arrival at the slaughterhouse, unloading, lairage areas, and then through the slaughter process in handling, restraint, stunning, and slaughter bleeding, and ensuring that the animal is dead at the end of the process. The recorded film and any other information must be retained for 90 days. That seems a reasonable length of time for any investigation to be carried out, and is also reasonably feasible with cloud-based storage and other similar facilities. And the access to the CCTV live system and the recordings needs to be provided to inspectors, in this case mostly the official veterinarian. And that legislation requiring those things came into force in May 2018. Now, why all slaughterhouses? Wasn't it possible to take a proportionate approach? Well, we believed, and still do, that all animals should have the same level of protection at the time of killing. They don't choose whether to enter a large, medium, or small slaughterhouse. The voluntary uptake, as I said before, was mostly in larger premises because of retailer demand. So increasing the coverage meant having to get into medium and smaller slaughterhouses. But as a result, in smaller premises, the CCTV installation is smaller, possibly only a handful of cameras, if that, and can be run from a laptop. So the cost to the business is proportionate to the size. In order to further reduce the burden, because we understood a lot of the premises that we were going to impact upon were small businesses, there was a 6-month transition period in the legislation to allow installation to take place, which meant that enforcement of the rules didn't begin until November 2018. As we said before, there were also considerable benefits we felt for operators, and also a great deal of guidance and engagement with industry was made available just to make sure that there was understanding and compliance. So with our colleagues in the Food Standards Agency, we met with industry several times, visited several slaughterhouses to understand industry concerns, especially with particular facilities. We did publish guidance on our website, particularly on compliance with the legislation, but there was also much more detailed guidance available to slaughterhouse operators that we developed with the Food Standards Agency. And also a team from the Food Standards Agency, I think I'm right, visited virtually every slaughterhouse to make sure that they understood what their obligations were. Now, my colleague Collin will go into this in much more detail, but enforcement began in November 18 with verbal and written warnings that would escalate to an enforcement notice if need be. But we did achieve full compliance in early 2019. And again, Collin will go into this in much more detail, but we know that slaughterhouse operators are now using the systems for all the reasons that we set out before, particularly training and assessing their own operations, We know that official vets are using the CCTV in the slaughterhouse to aid their work, and it has been used in support of enforcement. I did say I was speaking only for England at the moment, but in a quick sort of stop press, the Scottish government passed its own legislation on mandatory CCTV last year, and those requirements will come into force next month. The Welsh government have also included a requirement for CCTV in all slaughterhouses in their work programme for the next Parliament. So hopefully we'll have a fair amount of coverage in the UK in the next year or so. And that's where I'll stop and perhaps invite my colleague Collin Willson to continue with some of the more practical aspects.
That was good. So, CCTV in slaughterhouses. As Richard has said, there's been, since 2009, Animal Aid, which are one of the welfare-linked animal charities that did a lot of undercover filming in slaughterhouses throughout England and Wales, and they exposed a lot of welfare concerns. This led to the Food Standards Agency doing a lot of investigations, leading to prosecutions, and also to the suspension or revocation of certificates of competence in many individuals. Some of the businesses did close after the recent footage, but a few of them have since recommenced slaughter under different ownership. And next page. This undercover filming and the exposure to the poor welfare standards resulted in a lot of public opinion, and that became much more focused on slaughter welfare. RSPCA Freedom Foods were the first UK assurance body to require CCTV from their participating slaughterhouses, but it didn't take long for the major UK retailers to require CCTV in the slaughterhouses supplying them, and all of them used a very similar template for it. Most recently, Red Tractor Assurance, which is an independent assurance body, providing a sort of red tractor logo which can be applied to the product, have also required slaughterhouses in the UK working to their standards to have CCTV in live animal areas. So where is CCTV required? Well, basically Regulation 3 of the legislation in England says that a business operator of a slaughterhouse must ensure that a CCTV system is installed that provides a complete and clear image of killing and related operations in all areas of the slaughterhouse where live animals are present. And the key thing here, which we've had many discussions about, is where live animals are present. And we agreed with DEFRA and Richard as a colleague, and so that animals that are alive but unconscious are also included in this. But it does, and it also includes external areas where animals are held, such as sheds or a field lairage. So methods that result in simple stunning, and so therefore only unconsciousness, will require CCTV to be present in the bleeding area until a point at which the animal is dead. In the UK, slightly different legislation on CAS systems, in that they are required to kill the animals, not to render them unconscious. Decision was made by DEFRA that CCTV was required on entry, during the process, and on exit. And in normally during the process would be at or around the point at which animals will be expected to become unconscious. And the idea, obviously, on exit is just to ensure that there's no recovery. Obviously, I presume everybody knows what 1099 says about head-to-body stunning being simple stunning, captive bolt simple stunning. Water bath with 50 hertz is not simple stunning, but all other frequencies are. Very few premises use a free bullet or projectile, although in some larger cattle premises, if they have bulls or whatever, they will do that. I've got a few diagrams which are very simple, but they try to show where CCTV is required for different species and different stunning methods. And for methods that result in death, obviously I show the CCTV as question mark because at this point animals should be dead, but the provision of camera in these areas may be needed and would always be good practice to show any animal showing with signs of recovery. Slaughter by religious rites without prior stunning, CCTV will be required in the bleed area as well. And this is the first diagram. I won't spend a huge time going through them, but effectively the idea is it shows how you've got arrival, layeraging, movement restraint, whether that be a V restraint or a group stun system, the act of slaughter and bleeding all require CCTV. And then for poultry, again, you've got the unloading, the layeraging, shackling where appropriate, water bath or slaughtering, depending on whether it's electrical or non-stun. And then again, through the bleeding process, you need CCTV. For poultry gas stunning, you would need CCTV in the areas up to where the birds are in their crates into the gas stun system, and a camera at one point within the gas stun system and at the exit from the gas stun system. Cattle and calves with captive bolt stun, then captive CCTV required from unloading, layerage, movement restraint, stunning, slaughter, and bleeding, and equally well for non-stun slaughter, a similar requirement. With calves, we're using a head-only electrical stun, or with cattle for a Jarvis box, and we have a number of premises in the UK that use the Jarvis box head-to-body stun system for cattle. You'd have, again, the similar layerage, movement, stunning, and bleeding areas requiring CCTV. For pigs, electrical stunning head or head-to-body, you need CCTV in all these areas, remembering that even head-to-body, as far as the 1099 is concerned, is simple stunning, even though the reality is that it is effectively killing the animal because of the fibrillation. And with captive bolt stunning, again, CCTV through the system up to the point of the bleed area. Pigs for gas stunning, similar to the poultry. So you've got gas stunning up to the point that they go into the gas stun system with a camera at the entrance, at the exit, and in the chamber. We, just prior to the introduction of the legislation, the Humane Slaughter Association, HSA, held an all-day seminar on CCTV with a wide range of attendees, not only from within the UK, but from across Europe as well. And there were some questions raised for both the FSA and DEFRA. And the common questions on CCTV were, if we've got high-sided pens, do we need to see all the pen? If we've got a field layerage, does it need CCTV? As we said just now, gas stun systems, do they need cameras in the gas chamber? Water bath stunners, do they need a camera to see the water bath? And one very common question was, can we use a camera that has a movement sensor? The answers to these were, for high-sided pens, yes. All live animals need to have CCTV providing a complete and clear image. So what many people did was they mounted cameras above the pens, but in those cases, it meant they often had to have far more cameras than they'd originally anticipated. Field layerages, the view there is that if the field layerage is part of the approved premises, allowing free movement of animals backwards and forwards, then yes, it needs CCTV. And we have a small number of premises that do have field layerages with CCTV in England. Cameras that use a movement sensor, the answer was no, because the problem we realized was that if animals are lying down and not moving, then you don't trigger recording and the cameras switch off. And water bath stunners, well, yes, we considered that you required CCTV there because the poultry are alive at entry, unconscious at exit. And actually, it's quite handy if you've got a camera that actually is mounted looking into the water bath stunner. You do get a better idea of if there are any problems. Is the water level too low? Birds not touching the water, etc. That actually has proved to be quite beneficial. Our domestic legislation requires that for gas stunning of pigs and poultry, there is also a means of visually monitoring the animal within the gas stun system. Now, the Linco poultry gas stun system that was discussed earlier on this morning, interesting, was marketed with movable cameras. However, the view was that these did not provide the requirement for CCTV. And interestingly, the companies that have those systems found it very difficult to actually adapt those cameras to record. And so what most of them did is they put a camera above the pit for the Linco system, so it actually went sort of down into the pit, and that's actually worked quite well. We have, I'm not sure, is it 4 or 5 premises in the UK with Linco systems. The DEFRA officials visited pig and poultry slaughterhouses with gas stun systems, and they made a decision that there needed to be a camera at entry to the gas stun system to determine the status of the animals, one at the exit to show that they have all been killed as required by WATUC, and one camera placed in the gas chamber to show around about the point of unconsciousness, appreciating that Many of you will probably say, well, how do you know where that occurs? Our view was we try to get people to put it at that point so that we get some sort of an idea that birds are becoming unconscious and whether there's any distress. There is no particular legislation as to where that camera has to be, other than it should show the point of unconsciousness where possible. We did have a very small number of premises that chose not to install CCTV, and some did cease production as a result. Some of them, however, were seasonal premises that only operated, shall we say, in the month or so before Christmas, and they, in many cases, recommenced production after installing CCTV. One issue that we did have was that the impending introduction at the time of the additional requirements and therefore costs of 1099 Annex 2, particularly with regard to stunning equipment, was a factor in some decisions that the combination of installing CCTV and having to buy a new electrical stun system in some small red meat premises did result in their closure. However, we did get compliance in early 2019. Some of that delay was because of the decision on CCTV and gas stun systems not being made until a late point in time. We have had some premises that have had problems with the requirements for 90-day storage. But interestingly, where we've looked at this, in a lot of cases, this has been the result of people erroneously altering the picture quality and the frame rate. And that's resulted in a massive increase in the data storage, and their system has just not been able to store the 90-day storage. And once they've reverted to the original settings, that in many cases has then been resolved. One issue that we do have in the UK is that we have different bodies taking responsibility. So the Food Standards Agency are responsible for slaughterhouse operations, but local authorities and animal health are responsible for transport. And one issue we have had is that the legislation doesn't allow local authorities access to the footage. If there is a suspected transport issue, it only allows access in relation to the domestic WATC and 1099. So we have had issues where investigation of transport compliances have been compromised. Certainly, I would say to anybody doing this, make sure that anybody can see the footage where they need to be as officials. Within the Food Standards Agency, both the official vets and the official auxiliaries are all empowered to view and access CCTV in all premises. There is a rota to allow random and live viewing. So we encourage our staff to not only just look at live footage, but to go back and look at, for example, footage from during the night when there have been deliveries and that sort of thing. The ability to obtain images of good quality has proved very beneficial to the FSA and our investigators in determining the cause of welfare incidences and identifying those responsible. One problem has, however, been identifying individuals in situations such as multiple staff on a poultry line net cutting stand. If you've got 3, 4, 5 people standing there on a poultry line doing net cutting with their backs to the camera, really you just don't know who is responsible. And you often have to treat that as a business operator issue rather than an individual operator. One thing that we have found with CCT, that if you've got concerns about a particular animal or group of animals in the slaughterhouse, live images are often very useful in observing the natural behavior. And you will see things like hidden lameness sometimes in sheep. They come off the lorry, they walk into the pens and the ledge, and they look absolutely fine. Sheep being sheep, it'll be not me, I'm not lame. But by the time they've settled in there for 15, 20 minutes or so, and there's nobody about, you'll often then be able to see lame ones which you couldn't see previously. That can be quite useful to the official vet when they're doing their ante-mortem. We routinely view CCTV where there are any concerns about welfare, and especially for out-of-hours issues. This has been very, very useful. We have had a few problems with obtaining recordings. That's mostly been due to a lack of technical knowledge, and that has led to delays in looking at evidence available. We now routinely use CCTV in nearly all welfare-related enforcement in England, and the ability to look at footage and particularly to view it frame by frame is a massively useful tool in assessing cases and providing evidence. I do a lot of expert witness work for the Food Standards Agency, and it really has been a revelation in how you can approach these cases and provide your evidence. Much has been said about the use of CCTV to back up formal action, but it's important to realize that CCTV footage can also be useful for the business operator in identifying staff who are not working to their accepted standards, or hauliers delivering animals not handling livestock in a suitable manner. Equally, CCTV can be used for training. Now, one thing that we have also been aware of is that some of the larger companies have identified staff not working to their standards and have dismissed them because they've not been working to the welfare standards. And the problem then has been that that individual retains their certificate of competence, and the FSA are unable to take action because we don't have the evidence, and the company very often won't provide us with the evidence for that individual having been dismissed. And that's, again, a bit of a loophole that we will need to look at in due course. We've also had a number of instances where CTT has identified that a welfare problem, actually there was no one responsible. It was a genuine accident, things like animals jumping fences, getting themselves stuck and so on, where there was nobody in the area. We've also been able to use CCTV in some cases where the OV on the spot thought that an individual wasn't following welfare legislation, and they either suspended or revoked their COC, yet subsequent viewing of CCTV has demonstrated that from a different angle, particularly with the benefit of freeze-frame viewing, the individual was not responsible for an act in breach of legislation, and therefore the suspension or revocation of the COC was able to be lifted promptly. And that, again, is another positive benefit of CCTV in slaughterhouses. The regulations came to force on the 4th of May, 6-month transition period till the 5th of November. We identified that there were 234 slaughterhouses that were confirmed as having installed a compliance system by the 28th of February 2019. And there is more data on the FSA board report, where I put a link below. I've also got a little bit of a graph which was done for our Food Standards Agency board to show how we progressed from 5th of November, which was the actual compliance date, up until the end of January, where we had virtually got every single premises in England compliant. And you can see that it was a constant climb. One of the delays was that a large number of the poultry and pig premises using gas stun hadn't installed systems to the standard that was required at a very late stage in the process. So what has compulsory CCTV in English slaughterhouses done? Well, it's resulted in better clarity around welfare-related intervals, events in live animals. It enables us to review footage, freeze framing where needed. So the outcomes of CCTV are both positive from an enforcement point of view, but also very importantly show that in some cases individuals were not responsible for welfare incidents. Thank you for listening.